I grew up in a small village called Nkyum, a quiet place surrounded by thick forest and red hills. We were farmers and hunters, living simple lives. But there was one thing that made our village different. A woman named Adanna. Adanna was not like any other woman. She was tall, muscular, and strong enough to lift a basket of yams that two men could barely carry. People used to whisper that her strength came from her mother's spirit, a warrior who died fighting many years ago. Still, she was kind. She helped the elders, fetched water for the old, and always protected the children when fights broke out among the boys. But everything changed one night. It started with the sound of drums, not ours but from the neighboring village of Obodo, who had long hated us. We saw their fires on the hills and heard their war cries echoing through the dark. They were coming for revenge and we were not ready. The men gathered their spears and shields, but everyone knew we were outnumbered. Adanna stood in front of the village square, her body shining with sweat under the moonlight. She didn't have armor, only a short wrapper tied around her waist and a spear in her hand. I remember her voice, calm, deep, certain. If the men fall, the women will rise. Tonight, Nkyum will not burn. The elders tried to stop her. They said women do not fight wars. But she didn't listen. She walked straight into the forest path leading to Obodo, alone. I was only a teenager then, but I followed her from afar with two of my friends. We saw her kneel by the old shrine, touching the ground 3 times and whispering something in the air. Then she stood up and kept walking until the moon disappeared behind the clouds. When the enemies came, they were met not by warriors, but by her. She fought like she was made of stone. Her spear moved faster than the eye could follow. She brought down men twice her size, and when her weapon broke, she fought with her bare hands. We watched in fear and awe as she screamed a war cry that made even the trees tremble. They tried to surround her, but something strange happened. A wind rose from the forest, swirling around her. The attackers stumbled and ran. Some said they saw the shadow of a giant woman standing behind her, her mother's spirit protecting her. By dawn, the battlefield was silent. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, and the invaders were gone. Adanna was covered in cuts, her hands shaking. She walked back into the village with her spear dripping blood. Nobody spoke. She just said one thing. Nkyum still stands. After that day, people feared and respected her. But she changed. She stopped laughing, stopped talking to anyone. At night, people said they could hear her crying near the shrine, whispering to the wind. Months later, she disappeared into the forest and never came back. The elders said the gods took her because no human woman was meant to carry the spirit of 2 warriors. But sometimes when the wind blows from the hills, we still hear her war cry, echoing through the trees, protecting us from danger. And we know, Adanna still guards Nkyum. The day the drums returned. It had been 3 years since Adanna vanished into the forest. 3 long, quiet years. The elders said peace had returned to Nkyum. Crops grew well, children played without fear, and people spoke of her like she was a spirit who once walked among us. But sometimes at night, when the wind blew through the palm trees, we could still hear her faint war cry. It sounded distant, like a warning. Then one afternoon, while the sun was hot and the women were pounding yam in the square, a small boy came running from the forest path, barefoot, breathless, covered in dust. He fell to the ground and screamed, "They are coming. The men of Aduk. They have spears. They are burning the farms." Everything stopped. The men grabbed their weapons, rusty spears, bows, machetes. But we all knew we were not ready. Not like before. Not without her. Aduk was not like Obodo. They were known for raiding villages and taking everything, crops, livestock, even people. They had warriors trained from childhood, men who didn't fear blood or screams. When we heard their drums in the distance, the same sound that once brought Adanna to battle, our hearts sank. Some of the men tried to lead a defense at the river crossing, but they were quickly overpowered. I watched from behind a fallen tree as they fell one by one, brave but helpless. There was no voice shouting courage. No figure standing tall under the moonlight. No wind rising to protect us. The enemy entered the village before sunset. They set fire to the huts, broke pots, and shouted war songs as they chased people into the forest. The old men were dragged to the square, the women screamed, and the children ran crying. I hid in the bush with my mother and younger brother, shaking. I wanted to believe she would come, that maybe, somehow, Adanna would appear from the forest like before. But she didn't. By night, Inkyum was gone. Smoke, ashes, and silence. We wandered for days, hungry, barefoot, finding only a few survivors. The once loud village was nothing but burnt clay and dead ground. I remember sitting near the ruins of the shrine, the same place she once knelt before battle. I touched the soil and whispered, "Adanna, where are you? We needed you again." Then as the wind passed through the trees, I heard something, faint but clear, the sound of a flute. A deep, haunting tune carried by the night air. And for a brief moment I felt something move around me. The firelight flickered, the air grew cold, and I could swear I saw her shadow by the shrine, tall, still, watching. The next morning when we came back to bury our dead, the ashes of the shrine were cold. But at its center lay a fresh spear standing upright in the soil, clean, sharp, untouched by fire. The elders said it was a sign that Adanna's spirit had returned to guard us once more. But I think, maybe she never left. Maybe she just waited for us to remember that courage does not die with the body. Because now, every time the drums of another village echo in the distance, the wind begins to rise before we can even pick up our weapons. And somewhere beyond the forest, Adanna still walks. The return of the warrior queen. For many seasons after the fall of Inkyum, the land remained silent. Ashes covered the ground where laughter once lived. The forest grew thick around our broken huts, and people whispered that our ancestors had turned their faces away. But one dawn, when the first rooster crowed and the mist rolled off the river, something stirred in the forest path. A sound, steady footsteps, slow but strong. I was among the few who stayed behind, trying to rebuild what we could. When I looked up, I saw a figure walking toward the village. Her body was wrapped in animal skins, her face scarred but calm. At first I thought I was dreaming. But as she stepped into the light, I dropped the basket in my hand. It was Adanna. Her hair was longer, braided with red beads. Her spear glowed faintly in the morning sun. She looked stronger, not just in body but in spirit. The villagers gathered, stunned. Some cried, some knelt. Adanna smiled and said softly, "I told you Inkyum will never die." She walked through the burnt square, touching the walls, whispering to the soil. Then she raised her spear and drove it deep into the ground. "From this day no village shall make us slaves. We will rise again and stronger." From that moment, everything changed. Under Adanna's command, the men rebuilt the walls, the women crafted weapons, and the young ones were trained to defend the land. She taught us unity, not fear. She said courage was the true shield and kindness the real weapon. She sent messengers to other villages not to beg but to warn. Inkyum lives. The spirit of the warrior breathes again. Some laughed, thinking it was just talk. But when a small army from another village tried to attack, Adanna led her people into battle herself. That day the drums of Inkyum roared louder than thunder. Adanna stood in front, her spear flashing in the sunlight, her voice calling the names of the ancestors. By sunset the enemies fled, leaving their weapons behind. Word spread across the lands. Villages that once mocked Inkyum now brought gifts, yams, goats, beads, to show respect. Traders came from far away to see the village of the warrior queen. Soon, Inkyum became the strongest and most peaceful village in the region. Adanna was crowned the first female ruler, the Queen of Inkyum. Under her reign, no blood was shed without reason. The people lived without fear. The children sang songs of her bravery by moonlight. Adanna, daughter of fire, mother of courage, who faced death and brought life again. I was there the day she sat on the throne carved from the sacred Irako tree. She looked at us, not with pride but with warmth. "This throne belongs to all of you," she said. "Because when I was gone, your faith kept the fire alive." That night the whole village danced. The drums echoed through the forest, and the river glowed under the moonlight as if the ancestors themselves were watching. Joy had returned to Nkyum. Our people were free, strong, and united once more. And as the flames of celebration rose high into the sky, I realized something. Adanna was more than a warrior. She was the heartbeat of Nkyum. The proof that even in ashes, a village can rise again.